Morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning.
morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishnah Yisika, Parak Aleph, Chapter 1. Excuse me. Mishnah Aleph, Mishnah 11. Okay. Richie, today's Mishnah is going to be your Mishnah about teepees.
Oh,
Okay. Ha'isa Sukase Kamin Srif. One who makes his sukkah, the R scroll translates this Kamin Srif like a teepee. That's the case.
Not round, but just
Right now, the point is, that you're making it where it comes to a point on top, right? You lay whatever, you took kosher material for schach, and you set up in a way that they're leaning on each other, coming to a point. And it has to also be talking about, now don't forget, a sukkah has to have 3 walls. So that means it has to be up against another wall to get your third wall, okay? But this is what you have. Let's say he didn't make a teepee, but he took the schach material and he leaned it against the wall. Okay, just leaning it against the wall.
a lean-to.
That's what it's called.
Yeah, lean-to.
Really, never knew that. All right, a lean-to. Okay, and again, he has to be leaning this lean-to in a way that you have 3 walls. Okay, like I have in the picture. Now, what's the halacha? Kosher sukkah or not? Rabbi Eliezer Paisel. Rabbi Eliezer says it is invalid. Excuse me. Because it doesn't have a roof. The Chachamim but the Chachamim say that it is kosher. Now, the point of Rabbi Eliezer is, like in both the case of the teepee or in the case of the lean-to, where's your roof? Well, maybe it is, maybe it is no roof. Maybe it's all walls. There's no way of really differentiating, what's the roof and what's the wall. And therefore, you don't have a sukkah. Sukkah has to have a roof, or it has to have a roof that's at least recognizable. The Chachamim say, you don't have to have recognizable. I could look at this half of the roof and that half is the wall, and I'll be good to go. So the halacha is like Rebbe Lezer, that the teepee, the lean-to are not a kosher sukkah. However, it could be kosher in the following way. Now, it's going to be hard, to see it on this picture. But in this picture, instead of it leaning on the wall, there's like a little piece of something jutting out of the wall that's flat. And then you lean the piece of schach onto that. So now your lean-to has a roof. It's got a little roof. If that little roof is a tefach wide, then you're good to go.
Even 1 tefach.
1 tefach is enough. 1 tefach is enough to be considered a roof to make an oel, to make a tent. Now, at the same time, there's the obvious question. The schach of a sukkah, right, has to cover 7 by 7 tefachim. It's got to do that. 1 second. Okay. By the way, in this picture, I think it's important to point out that when we're talking about that, it's leaning on this thing jutting out, and we're saying that's your roof. You've got schach over that part too. Okay, schach is going over that part also. Now, but still, where's your 7 by? It's a little bit, but okay. Now, at the same time, where's your 7 by 7 tefachim? Right, the sukkah has to be 7 by 7 tefachim. Where is it? It's not on top. So the answer is that once you go ahead and you have that flat, that little bit of flat, that's a tefach wide, to be considered a minimum roof. Now I can go ahead and look at some of the slope as my roof, and then some of it as wall. So if at some point in the wall, I will have an area of 7 tefachim between the wall and the leaning schach, that covers an area of 7 tefachim by 7, meaning it's 10 tefachim high, and it's 7 by 7 tefachim wide. So that's my sukkah. That is where my walls will go up to that amount, let's say 10 tefachim or even higher. And then the rest of the schach, which is narrower than the 7 by 7 tefachim, that's part of my roof. I can do that. I can split up the slant and say some of it is wall and some of it is roof, if I actually have some roof. If I actually have some roof, then I can look at some of the slant as roof, and the rest of it that again will cover the minimum dimensions, dimensions of a sukkah, 10 tvachim high, 7 tvachim wide. That'll be the area where it's my walls. So my sukkah will, at the end of the day, consist of walls that will encompass the minimum area, or at least the minimum area of the sukkah, and then the rest of the slant going up to where I'll have an actual roof, right, a flat roof, will all be considered roof.
Is this slant?
Take a look at this picture.
Continuous.
Okay, it is a continuous slant.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that on the top there's a certain area that's 1 tefach wide. That part of the schach is leaning over. So in that situation, once I have my roof, so then once I have that actual roof, let's call it, once I have an area within the sukkah that's going to be 10 tefachim high and 7 tefachim wide, then I will be able to say that I have the kosher dimensions of a sukkah. The fact that it starts, but again, you have to say that means that the walls of my sukkah start lower at a certain point of the sloping schach. My wall starts. I have roof, and then my wall starts. But it's very easy to say my wall starts once I have the dimensions of a kosher sukkah, which is going to be 10 tefachim high and with 7 tefachim wide. And then basically my slanted schach will be schach, right? Together with the roof, with the part that's 1 tefach wide, flat, and then the rest of it will be wall. And that's how I can have a kosher sukkah. Do we get that? You get it? So that's the halacha. If you don't have that flat tefach on top, it's not kosher. Once you have that tefach on top, then I'll be able to say that, so I have what's called a roof, because it's a tefach wide, and then I'll be able to say that the rest of the wall is partial schach and partial wall in the area that now has the dimensions, an area under that slanted schach, slanted branches, that is the minimum shear of a sukkah, 7 tefachim wide, 7 by 7 wide, and 10 tefachim high.
With the slant too, you should have that 10 tefachim
Correct.
wall.
Correct.
So it's slanting down, then you have it.
No, it's not flat. It can all be slanting. But as long as there is an area that is 10 tefachim high, that 10 tefachim high and 7 by 7 wide, that now becomes my sukkah area. And from that point down is my wall.
So that 10 tefachim could still be slanted.
Yes.
All right.
Let's put it this way here, Richie. Look at this picture, right? The wall is going to be slanted, but there's going to be an area of 10 tefachim high.
All right. It does that. The 10 tefachim doesn't have to. It could be at an angle. That's what it's showing me.
Well, the 10 tefachim is it creates an angle if you want to. I'm just saying there is a point in this sukkah with the slanted sides that's 10 tefachim high. Once I have an area that's 10 tefachim high, that means I have the area of a sukkah. I have the height of a sukkah.
Now the obvious question.
Let's move on.
Okay.
Now, Mishna continues. New case, new halacha. I'm going to talk about mats.
What?
Mats.
Mats.
You know?
All right.
Machatzeles kanim gedola. Now, just a quick introduction. They used to make large mats and small mats. Okay? The large mats were typically used for creating shade. That's the large mats were typically used for. Mm-hmm. The smaller ones, which basically fit a person, the size of a person lying down on them, was used for lying down or sitting on. Okay, that's important to know. We've got the big mats and the small ones. Mm-hmm. So the Mishna says, "Machatzeles kanim gedola." A mat made out of reeds. A large mat made out of reeds. Now let's just read the words. Asa l'shchiva, he made it for lying down. Mekabelas tuma, it's susceptible to tuma. V'misachin, and you cannot use it for a schach. Meaning, I should have given you another introduction. If you just take those flat wooden mats, right? Is it susceptible to tuma? If a dead sheretz comes on it, does it become tamei? Really depends. Depends what it's made for. So the fact that it's flat wood
Mhm.
actually says that it's not susceptible to tuma. Okay, pshuta klietz it's called. At the same time, that means a flat wooden utensil. Flat wooden utensils aren't susceptible to tuma. At the same time, and I'm not sure why, the halacha is that if you take that mat and you designate it for sitting purposes or for lying down purposes, then it is susceptible to tuma. So if it's only going to be used for covering, then it's not susceptible to tuma. If it is used for lying down or sitting, then it is susceptible to tuma. It could become tamei. And as we learned previously, something that can become tamei, you can't use peschach. Only something that can't become tamei can use peschach. So that's going to be discussion now about these mats. What are they used for? Depending on what they're used for, it makes a difference because I use them for schach or not. Now, the fact that they're a mat and they're tied together, right? Because it wouldn't be a mat otherwise, they're connected somehow or another. That doesn't bother us. That's not a problem necessarily. But right now, the issue is, what is this mat used for? So machatzelas kanim gedola. You have a large reed mat. Asar l'shchiva. He made it for lying down purposes. Mekabelas tuma. It is susceptible to becoming tamei. They mitzachimba, and you cannot use it for schach. L'sikuch, for covering, for making shade. Mitzachimba, then you could use it for schach. They mekabelas tuma, because it's not susceptible to tuma. Now, the way to read this Mishnah, as the Bartanur explains based on the Gemara, is the following. When it says a large reed mat, asa l'shchiva, he made it for lying down. He doesn't have to have in his mind, I am making this for lying down. Oh, I'm sorry. He does have to. I'm sorry. Take it back. If it's a large mat is typically made, back up. A large mat is typically made for shade purposes. So when the Mishnah says he made it for shechiva, that means this guy decided, I am using this large mat for lying down on. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm making it for, or that's what I'm designating it for, right? Either you made it for that purpose, or you designated it afterwards for that purpose. Once you make it or designate it for lying down purposes, now it's susceptible to tuma. Can't use it for schach. That's what it means. He made it for lying down. Les sichach, for shade, means not that you have to make it. Not that you have to have in mind for shade. That's typically what it's made for. So anytime you make a large mat, the understood intention is for shade purposes. And if you want to change its purpose, you have to actually have in mind and designate it for a different purpose, because typically that's not what it's made for. But if you just make a large mat, which is typically made for shade purposes, then that's what it's made for. It's not susceptible to tuma. You can use it for schach. Now, on the other hand, if let's say we're talking about a small one, right? It only mentioned the large one. Didn't mention the small one. What about the small one? What happens by a small one? So by a small mat, we say a small mat, the assumed purpose is lying down, which means it's sitting on. It is therefore susceptible to tuma, and you can't use it for schach. But l'sichoch, if you decide, no, I'm going to use the small one for shade, for making shade, then if I designate it for that or I made it for that, then now it's not susceptible to tuma and I can use it for schach. So there's a difference between a large one and a small one. That's the first opinion. Rabbi Eliezer says, whether it's a large one, small mat, or a large mat, if you made it for lying down, that means if you intended to use it for lying down, it's susceptible to tuma, and you can't use it for schach. If it's for shade, you could use it for schach, and it's not susceptible to tuma. So according to Belezer, there is no distinction between large or small. And according to Belezer, the presumed use of both a large one and a small one is for lying down. Even the large ones. They assumed the presumed purpose is for lying down. And therefore, that's what it means. It is made for lying down, and therefore acceptable to tuma, and you can't use it for schach. L'sichach, but if the owner redesignated it or not decided to designate it as purposes for making shade, then it's not acceptable to tuma, and you can use it for schach. And the halacha in this part of the Mishnah is not like Rebbe Eliezer. The halacha is a Tanakama. There is a distinction between the large mat and the small mat. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Was there something about the edges